Welcome back, casual gardeners. This video is all about tips to encourage pollinators in your garden. You know you need pollinators. I hope you want pollinators. If that's true, this video is for you. Annual plants can be a great addition to a pollinator garden if you keep in mind that a lot of the more popular cultivars have been bred over decades or centuries to produce showier flowers or more scent. And these changes from their wild type can actually reduce the amount of pollen or nectar that the plants produce and make them less attractive to pollinators. So while you're picking out your annuals, it's always a really great idea to try to stick to something that more closely resembles the native flowers that they were bred from instead of the really showy varieties. Even though they might provide lower quality forage for pollinators, they will provide it for a much longer period of time. Some of them spring all the way through fall when they're killed by the first frost. And that can make annual plants really valuable for pollinators, even though they're kind of like the cheeseburgers of pollinator food. Many annual plants are great because they can just be kind of packed into open spaces in your garden. I recently came across a phys.org article talking about a study that they did looking at popular cultivars of annual flowers and how popular they were with pollinators. I've made sure to link to that article in the description in case you'd like to read more. Unfortunately, it's not super specific about just what you should go out and buy to make your pollinators happy. So these researchers looked at different cultivars of petunias, begonias, pansies, geraniums, Impatiens and New Guinea impatiens, and they compared those in terms of pollinator visits during the study period. They found that the pollinator visits overall were pretty low compared to perennial flowers because these flowers aren't as good as a forage source. But one thing I thought was interesting was that the least popular variety of begonia was more popular than the most popular variety of geranium. Which kind of makes sense. Since we're talking annuals, I'm talking about the pelargoniums that we call geraniums. So their conclusion from this variation in the popularity of annual blooms is that we as private gardeners should probably try to have many different varieties of annuals in our pollinator plantings. And we should observe them and see if one is more popular than the others. That more popular one we should probably keep, and maybe we should consider swapping out the others and see if we can get more hits on whatever comes next. Perennial plants, and especially perennials that are closer to their wild type ancestors, are usually going to have much better value for pollinators in your garden and are going to attract a wider variety of pollinators. The downside is that these guys are often only going to bloom for 2 or 3 weeks. I think some perennials will go for as much as a month. But beyond that, I mean, there's nothing for the rest of the year for pollinators. And that can make the task of coordinating a pollinator garden with perennials a little bit more difficult. And unfortunately, since different perennials will survive in different climates, I can't give you specific pointers in this video. But it is possible to plan a perennial garden for pollinators that will offer flowers spring through fall. Now, one reason that you might choose to go with perennials, in addition to the fact that they're just better in terms of pollinator forage, is that you only have to buy them the one time. They tend to require less fertilizer, fewer soil amendments, and less feeding over time. Now, one choice that I've made, instead of trying to decide whether perennials or annuals are best in my garden, is that I've said, why not both? The advice I would give, though, is that it's much easier to squeeze annual flowers into a perennial flower bed than it is to try to squeeze perennials where you're mostly growing annuals. In my annual vegetable beds, you'll notice that I stick exclusively with annual flowers, and that allows me to have some time when I can have everything pulled out and rejuvenate the soil. So with that out of the way, here are some general tips, really general tips for planning your pollinator garden. You're going to want to choose pollinator plants that are appropriate for your climate and your native pollinators. Native plants are going to be easier to keep happy in your garden. It's going to be easier to give them appropriate amounts of water, and they're going to be more recognizable to your native pollinators. I know we all love the European honeybees, but in my state, for example, we've got over 900 species of native bees that I would love to keep fed as well. But while you're out looking for natives for your pollinator garden, it is okay to go with some popular cultivars of non-native plants if you must. All right, next, number 2, you're going to want to plant your flowers in bunches and in drifts. A lot of pollinators prefer to feed from just one type of flower at a time. It's actually true for European honeybees as well. They'll head out, and when they're foraging, they'll just hit all of the same flower that they can find, and then they'll head back to where they're storing their goodness that they've collected. The reason they do this is that it makes them a better partner for the flowers, because they're more likely to be carrying pollen for the flowers that they're visiting and pollinate them successfully. The reason this is good for the pollinator is that it means more of those flowers will be around for them later and they'll eat better. So it's a cooperative strategy between the pollinators and the plants. Third, you want to try for species diversity. A diverse mix of pollinator plants is going to attract a diverse population of pollinators and other beneficial insects to your garden. It will really kind of bump up the benefit to you as a gardener to have that diverse population of species visiting your plants. Fourth, you're going to want to provide, in addition to your pollinator plants, if you have the space, water and shelter for your visiting pollinators. Because most species of pollinators and other beneficial insects are going to require water sources in their neighborhood to stop and get a drink, especially at the height of summer. I know nectar sounds, wet, sounds like a beverage, like insect soda pop, but in addition to that, they will need water. So providing a water source will keep your bees and wasps and butterflies happy and visiting even more. If you can also provide, in addition to the water, a variety of habitats like shrubs and trees and bare earth patches around your garden for your visiting pollinators, they might choose to just move right into your garden. And that will make them more available for your plants when you need them. You may also consider providing a bee house in or near your garden to help your visiting pollinators nest and produce more offspring for next year. Fifth, and lastly for this video, avoid using insecticides or even herbicides, if you can help it, around your pollinator plants. Make your pollinator plants a refuge for the pollinators that visit your garden. If you must, say you've got like a really bad pest situation, treating in the evening when the flowers are closing up and the pollinators are down for the day is less likely to do harm to your pollinator populations than if you were to treat in the morning or in the midday. But even if you take those careful steps, there are pollinators like bumblebees, oh, they're so adorable, that will sleep sometimes in your flowers, and then, you've killed them. It's sad. Now, I know I've tried to stay away from recommending specific pollinator plants for your garden, just because I want you to get what's right for your climate. But I would love it if you let me know down in the comments if there are pollinator plants that are your favorites in your garden. Because maybe someone in a climate similar to yours will see your suggestion and that'll help them out. I need about 90 more subscribers to monetize my channel. So I'm going to ask you straight out, please subscribe to my channel. Also make sure that if you liked this video, you press that like button, and you can hit the notification bell if you'd like to see what I'm coming out with next. Upcoming videos, in case you're interested, I'm going to do a video on growing elderberries and currants, planting to encourage birds, because there are plants that we can choose to help our birds. I've also got a video coming up in which I discuss the results of the soil blocking experiment I started a few weeks back. So if you want to see those results, make sure you've hit the notification button as well. As always, thank you for joining me here in my garden today. And I hope you have a wonderful time in your own.